Welcome to Bets on the Future, where we highlight the various career paths in the electrifying metals world. From the vehicle you ride in to the bridge holding it up, metals are everywhere. Why not in your career too? I'm Jennifer Betts, a metals industry veteran with almost 20 years experience, here to highlight these incredible career paths as told by the women who are living them. This week, we will be joined by the incredibly talented Amy Hinton, the North American scrap editor for Fastmarkets. Amy brings a wealth of knowledge of metal recycling, specifically in the ferrous, i.e. steel, world. Currently, she manages a team of 6 reporters and is responsible for the pricing and coverage of ferrous, non-ferrous, and stainless scrap metal, as well as alternative irons, including pig iron. She has achieved remarkable success within the price reporting industry, and I cannot wait to share this conversation of finding the metals industry with Amy. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Me and my headset are happy to be here. So yeah, lovely to speak to you.
Likewise. I want to know a little bit more about you because I've known about you in the industry for a while, but we've never actually gotten the chance to talk. This is our first time actually speaking together. So I want to know, how did you even get into this? It's always interesting to me to see how people find the metals industry.
Yeah, I think it's anyone that knows me, and I think I've touched on this briefly before, it was a very round the houses way of getting into things, which is, it's very on brand for me. But I trained as a linguist initially, so that was my big thing when I was in university. Ended up leaving university, doing a string of banking roles in my 20s, and then just remember thinking, goodness me, I don't think I could, it all sounds very glamorous, but it's very data driven. And as much as I love all that, there wasn't much respite. And, having a background in languages, I really do enjoy communicating. So I got to the ripe old age of 29, and I think I was looking for something different, and a recruiter actually found me and was like, oh, have you considered maybe combining a few sort of, your numerical background with something, a little bit more, obviously there's a journalistic element to it, there's a communicative element to it. So I knew absolutely nothing about metals other than a very brief dalliance with sort of a trade finance department of a Japanese bank. So I knew enough about commodities that I wasn't, a complete novice, but and I just decided to go for it because I thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So very fortunately for me, as I'm sort of continuing to carve out a niche in the scrap market, my calling kind of dropped into my inbox, as it were, and now I'm very happy to be sort of in that market, which people find it so bizarre. I mean, my parents don't fully understand what I do even to this day, and I'm sure there are lots of people in the ferrous market that wish that I wasn't here, but sadly for them I am. So it was just a very kind of roundabout way, but I'm happy to be sort of carving a niche in an industry I never thought I would end up in and didn't know anything about, but turns out that I actually really love it.
It's a really interesting section of the metals industry. For folks that are unfamiliar with some of the terms that you threw out there, ferrous, Fe, that stands for iron. Ferrous is essentially the adjective for iron, things that stick to metal. And yes, I'm skipping over pure nickel sticks to metal, but generally speaking, things that stick to metal are ferrous material. And so that's a really large part of the sustainability movement as well, specifically in the United States. The ferrous scrap market, for instance, is huge, and 70% of the steel mills in the United States use recycled materials like the ferrous scrap. So you're in a rather large market, and it's global as well. And I'm sure you come across some really interesting characters and individuals in this industry.
Very much so, and I think it's really it's such a paradox because I had no, like, I live in Pittsburgh now. Obviously, I'm not from the States. I was really excited, and it was a new opportunity when the role came up to transition. Interestingly, as you mentioned, nickel, that was something I used to cover. I was in the primary metals market. I landed in the US, and I had no idea of the scale of what I was undertaking. call it brave, call it stupid, probably 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. And I just remember being, because it sounds very, we're pushing sustainability. Recycling is going to be a huge part of the future of infrastructure, and it already is. But you have the paradox that it's quite an archaic market, and I say that in the nicest possible way. It's sort of very traditional, so I feel it's actually quite an exciting time to be in the business, because you've got this kind of Wild West type vibe where we're really dealing with a very opaque market that's actually going to be driving the future. So I think we're actually at a kind of a tipping point now in terms of the impact that the industry that we're in will have on all of our lives moving forward. And I think you can't really overstate the importance of that. So it's really exciting. And I had no idea the gravity. I definitely bit off more than I could probably chew. And I think there'd be more than, enough people that I've come across that would tell you that that's definitely the truth. But, I'm excited to keep forging and pushing forward in that regard. Definitely.
It's something that most folks are completely unaware of. And they're also, if they do know about the recycled materials market, the ferrous scrap market, the non-ferrous markets, things that essentially provide the raw materials for the manufacturing in our United States, how would you describe what you do in terms of connecting it with those markets?
So our essential, so we are, in terms of what Fastmarkets' mission is, it's to bring transparency to the commodity markets. And we're a cross-commodity price reporting agency. So we are active in the metals and mining space, the scrap and secondary, primary metals, forestry products. We really do a bit of everything. But our main mission is to accurately report on markets and bring transparency to trading and give that insight to our end users that they perhaps wouldn't otherwise have. Now, obviously, I'll caveat that by saying there are plenty of people that would, give us varying marks out of 10 for accuracy, which we'll probably touch on later. But that's very much to provide we sit alongside the market and try and provide transparency where where we can. And I flatter us that we've done a fairly good job in that regard, which is particularly applicable for scrap and secondary markets, because they're not exchange traded like other metals. I came from a background covering primary and secondary aluminium, nickel, and covering the LME futures market. The uptake, I now cover the CME busheling market, something I'm in tune with on a daily basis, and the uptake for futures and exchange trading for ferrous has been almost negligible in comparison to other commodities. So there's a real place for us there, because where else are you going to, the people that are in this market, if they ask you for information on something, typically they wanted it yesterday. Like, there's no time to waste.
Yes.
So where we try and offer some transparency where there's a lot of opacity, and where there's kind of a much more sort of secretive bent to the way that people are doing their business, which is I totally respect that. It's it's business, it's all forms part of competition. But there's a bigger picture here when we're looking at the entire supply chain, all the way down to the original equipment manufacturers. So some huge players who sort of would rely on that transparency as much as people that are competing at a dealer or a seller level.
It's something the everyday person is not aware of. When people go to their grocery store, there's prices. It's already priced out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has decided that price, they put it out there, it's there. In the commodity world, you do have those exchanges where it's publicly available information on those, but that's for essentially the pure metals. And we are adding scrap contracts to those
Mm-hmm.
exchanges. But generally speaking, it's been, like you said, a little bit archaic in terms of it's a phone call, it's a text message, it's an email, it's essentially word of mouth. in the ferrous scrap market in the United States, it trades, generally speaking, once a month. So for 3 days, I suspect your life is extremely busy trying to track down all the individuals and the telephone calls that are happening at the beginning of the month to basically, essentially set the market for that month. People have 1 or 2 days really to make their contracts for the month.
I would love it if it was only 3 days. It's as time goes by, that period becomes more and more protracted. I mean, the market never specifically closes, but I would say the first 10 days of the month are really where we're on high alert. The reason being that that we have Midwest indices that need to be settled so that exchanges can wrap up their the given front month contract. So we're really under the cosh for 10 days of the month. And sometimes thereafter, it's an interesting timeline. And I would say that that's something that's becoming harder and harder to achieve with all of the wonderfully exciting things that have been happening in the ferrous markets. There's swathes of consolidation across the country, which is really driving driving the way that business is done. And I would say that with the added I wouldn't say it's definitely a positive thing in terms of the way that sustainability and the market is moving and evolving, but it can make it a more of a difficult job when you have a really rapidly evolving landscape. So the status quo when I started in this particular market 2.5 years ago is very different to what it is now. And it is a very traditional way of doing business. We are pounding the telephones. We're trying to speak to as many people as possible because that's really the long and short of it. Like it's the best way to get the job done, and it does take some time and dedication. I suppose it is what it is. I'd be interested to see actually how consolidation continues to affect the way that these markets are priced, because we've definitely seen that things are changing, particularly in terms of who the major players, the way that they're doing business, the way they're buying their scrap, how they're interacting with the market. Don't want to say too much and ruffle too many feathers, but it's definitely one thing to keep an eye on, particularly in terms of our team and just personally things that we're noticing.
On that note, from what you've seen happen over the past several years, where do you see that market going? Do you see additional consolidation, and is it going to be more consolidation on the supply side, on essentially the manufacturer side? What do you see coming down the pipeline?
I think we're going to see, we've already seen a lot of supply side consolidation. It's really the name of the game now that mills have really ensured that they're ahead of the raw materials curve in terms of ensuring that they've got captive tonnages. We've seen that with, not naming any names, probably don't need to for anyone that's listening to this. But I think we've seen a large bulk of that happening. I can't see that supply side consolidation stopping anytime soon. I think that really is the theme du jour. So I think that's very obvious and nothing that really needs to be stated. I think that's going to carry on. What I would be interested to see is how that is going to play out in terms of the way that the markets, individual regional markets, because the US market is very regional. We've seen that really there's been a sort of a north-south divide that's becoming more apparent, particularly in terms of the way that the prices pan out at any given month. I'll be interested to see if that's really going to dry up the traditional way that the markets operate. We've seen in certain smaller markets, certain commodities are becoming, markets for sort of less desirable raw materials are all but drying up. It's having a detrimental impact on smaller dealers and suppliers. which I think is a real shame, because one of the things that really attracts me to this market is the kind of the fact that it's sort of very traditional, family oriented, and I would really hate to see us get to the point where we're consolidated and there's not space. I would like to see continued reliance on smaller yards, people that have got, have had skin in the game for, centuries in some cases. We speak to people that have had a yard in their family for over 100 years. Like, I'd hate to see that kind of thing phased out.
I had this conversation the other day because I have similar concerns. I've worked for some of those large conglomerates in my day, and they will be continuing to purchase more of those companies. And so I have the same concerns, because it's been wonderful to have these interactions with these family-owned businesses over the years. And when I was talking to somebody about this, they brought up a couple really great examples. And I won't name any names, but people will be able to figure out if they're in the scrap world, who I'm talking about here. But essentially, there have been situations where family-owned businesses sold to the major conglomerates, right? And then after a couple years, after their non-competes or whatever their legal contracts are, you know what they did? They're not on an island. They're not, traveling around the world. You know what they decided to do after their hundreds of millions of dollars payout? They open up another scrapyard and they do it again, because that's what they love. That's what they want to do. And so it does give me hope that if there are going to be additional acquisitions, I mean, there will be, right? People are not going to just go off to an island. The folks that I'm sure you've met in this industry, some, yes, there might be a few that, yeah, they're going to go get their Richard Branson private island in the Bahamas or wherever. But there's going to be a lot of people, I would say the majority of the folks, that if they do sell their family business, they're going to go and start another one. They're not going to, the entrepreneurs that are out there are not going to stop being entrepreneurs.
No, and more power to them. I think that's incredibly smart. And if I were in that position, that's what I would do. Nothing says let's have another crack at the whip like a huge injection of liquid capital. Like, I think it's a fantastic idea. And with all of that expertise, I mean, people are fortunate that people that are fortunate enough to be born into a family business, a generational business, grow up around it. I think it would be very hard to sort of turn off the switch. So no, and I hope that that we continue to sort of see new and exciting things, because the landscape is evolving, demand is accelerating so rapidly, so there's definitely a market for these things, and there's nothing to say that people couldn't or shouldn't re-enter at a different point. So I think I'm all for it personally. I think it's a good thing.
For the folks that are listening that are not familiar with the ferrous scrap market, it is something that's a little bit of a unique spot in the United States. And we'll go around the world to put it a little bit in perspective. But it's a really great business opportunity for individuals that want to start a scrapyard, right? It's because there is a sustainability push. There is a drive in the United States and around the world, minus a handful of some countries, but generally speaking, they're switching from the integrated methods and switching over to electric arc furnaces in the way that we produce steel. So essentially, in layman's terms, producing steel from ore from the ground up, scratch, if you will, or essentially melting down existing steel that's out there in a more sustainable fashion. And yes, I am glossing over that the integrated methods are coming up with some more sustainable practices in there. But that being said, 70%, and it's growing, of the steel market in the United States is electric arc furnaces, and it's growing, and there's going to be a continued demand for it. So the raw materials, the ferrous scrap that's in the United States, is only going to be in higher demand in the upcoming years. So even if there is consolidation from these major steel mills that are trying to secure their raw materials, it doesn't mean that there isn't a business opportunity for additional scrap yards to pop up. There absolutely is going to be more of a need for that service for manufacturers that are producing the scrap, for the municipalities that maybe don't have the best recycling program in place, there's going to be an economical opportunity for businesses in the United States to partake in this industry.
No, absolutely. And I think the very interesting, the drive towards it is huge, and all the numbers are supportive of this fact. If you take I've written about this until I'm basically blue in the face, but if you take this very much lauded infrastructural bill that the current administration is really pushing, like it's $1 trillion initiative it's really gonna, drive. Let's take rebar as our example. If you look at the sheer volume of rebar that would be required to build all of these wonderful new houses, bridges and tunnels and other such things that are on the horizon, it's going to take broadly a 98.5% scrap input. So if you take your rebar number and then look at how much scrap you're going to need, it's give or take a few percent. It's an almost direct conversion to the amount of material that's going to be needed. Your heavy melt, your P&S, your shred and other such things that would typically go into that melt. Like it's an almost 1-for-1 ratio. So you can't really overstate and from conversations that we had, our first post-COVID scrap conference, in-person conference back in January, and we were talking to some executives there, and they really think that the green shoots are going to start to come through in the latter half of this year and there beyond. So this is a really, it's an exciting time and a good time to jump in, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For those that are looking to get into the metals industry, particularly on the ferrous scrap side of things, or just really in the scrap world at all, do you have any recommendations or suggestions on how they can get into it?
Get yourself down to ISRI, so Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. I really am a huge fan of the work they do. I attend as many of their chapter meetings and conventions as I can, and I think don't quote me on this, but the membership fee pays itself 1,000,000 times over in networking opportunity. I'm someone that likes to throw myself in and try and meet as many people as possible, and you've really got a captive audience. I think the work they do is fantastic, and you won't find a better way, if you're willing to throw your hat in the ring, to communicate with industry professionals from across the supply chain, than you will at an ISRI event. So I would say, if I were trying to really get into the business and break ground, that is what I would do. That would be my first port of call. And then after there, the onus is on you to do your research and have the conversations with the right people. And they're very, aside of the fact that they're fantastic opportunities for business networking, they're also very enjoyable. And you'll meet people that,
Yes.
I speak to people now that, I never limit yourself. You're covering ferrous one day, but you never know. You might be doing ferroalloys, you might be doing titanium 10 years from now. You just don't know. And I've met people that I speak to in markets that have no direct correlation to the things that I'm working on now, but you don't know where you're going to end up. And I think that the relationship between all of these things is that it can be useful to learn as much about other markets as it is to cover your own. So that, to answer your question, I'd say get yourself down to ISRI. So I'll send them my invoice for commission later on.
I was just about to say, insert the ad for ISRI at this point in the.
I know, I can't believe I should have asked them to, that was completely off the cuff, but I should have thought to give them a phone call and said, are you interested in sponsoring this episode?
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's topical as well, because nationals are next month in Nashville, so everyone's kind of gearing up to head there in a month's time or so. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Yes, that's a fantastic answer. If you are unable to go to ISRI in person, but you have access to a computer, check out their LinkedIn page, go to their website, see their posts on social media. I believe they're on Twitter and possibly Instagram as well. and start seeing who's commenting on their posts. That's also another really great networking angle, because if you're trying to get into the industry, you can start to see who the players are, what they're doing. ISRI covers a wide variety of businesses, from the recycled materials world. It can be metals, it can be paper, plastic. It's a really great organization to be a part of, to network through. And it 10 out of 10. I 100% agree with you. I'm very much looking forward to Nashville as
Funny
well.
story, actually. Because we've never, this is the first time we've spoken face to face, but I did see you in St. Louis for Consumer Night. And I was waiting for coffee in the Starbucks at the Union Station Hotel. I was going to come and introduce myself because I recognized you. And we obviously have mutual contacts and friends. And then someone accosted me to talk about one of the markets. And I never got the offer. So I ended up talking about machine shop turnings with somebody instead of getting to introduce myself. So point being, you never know who you're going to meet or who you're going to spot there. So definitely a good one
Oh,
to get yourself
absolutely.
to.
And St. Louis is a fantastic one. It's 1,500, 2,000 of your closest friends in the scrap market, all in one room. And yes, it's very challenging to meet all the people that you need to in those situations, because there are so many people that you can have wonderful conversations with during that time.
Yeah, no, very much so. I do, and they're enjoyable too. Like, I feel like obviously we all know that we're very professional and committed to what we're doing, but we're human at the end of the day, and I think it's as important to go there and maintain relationships, and particularly in this day and age post COVID, where things are increasingly moving online, people are working remotely. You can't overstate the importance of being able to see people face to face, because I do think that makes the world of difference. And that's one of the things I do think is particularly good about the ferrous scrap market, which may get a bit of stick for maybe not being as slick or forward facing as nickel, let's say, with the EV bubble and things like that. But the best thing about it is that kind of human, sort of more traditional way of doing business.
On that note, I will ask you, if somebody does want to get a hold of you, though, what's the best way to find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Twitter? I know Twitter is a really big one for journalists.
So I'm everywhere. I try to be everywhere anyway.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. I am on Twitter. I must admit I've been a little bit remiss with the Twitter, but I sort of actively canvass the space, and haven't posted anything there for a while. So Twitter, LinkedIn, definitely. And then if anyone uses Fastmarkets service, like we're fairly free and easy with attaching our emails to anything that we write. So if anyone takes real exception, they can get hold of me. But I would say, if anyone wants to get in touch with me on the strength of this, just drop me a direct message on LinkedIn. I'm fairly responsive. In fact, I'm very responsive. That's another good way to keep an eye out for what's going on, really. The importance of LinkedIn, and I've some gems you can find that if you connect with the right people. So yeah, if anyone needs me, send me a DM on LinkedIn.
Well, that's more or less how we ended up talking. It is from LinkedIn connections, is from mutual connections that more or less said, you two need to talk to each other and get together. And so unfortunately we weren't able to get the coffee machine shop turnings. I understand they're very
I
important to
know,
come.
you can hold them personally. I hold them personally responsible. That's another story for another time, maybe.
Yes, maybe not when the microphones are around at this point. But we are going to meet up in Nashville, so I'm really looking forward to that, to actually meeting you in person. I want to say thank you so much for coming on here, discussing your background, your experience, the metals industry, particularly the U.S. ferrous scrap market. For anyone that's interested in getting a hold of Amy, by all means, find her on LinkedIn, Twitter. She's a fantastic expert in our industry, and so she's a wonderful connection to have. So thank you so much, Amy, for being on here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I will put your commission check in the post. Thank you very much for that glowing review. I appreciate it. No, it's been really enjoyable. I'm always happy to talk, as anyone who knows me well will tell you. But yeah, I'm always available. So I would say, people don't be afraid to reach out if there's, you know, anything at all, industry related or otherwise. You know, we're all, you know, I do think that it's a really, the more the merrier. Always happy to offer some advice if there's anything that people think that they, you know, they might glean from talking to me. I'd urge them to.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it. And again, this is Amy Hinton. She is the senior pricing reporter for the U.S. Ferrous scrap market for Fastmarkets, formerly AMM. Thank you.
Thank you.